idea of going beyond hatred becomes one of the most important ideas. Of course, then he says later in the next verse that even hatred has its origin in ignorance. So the ultimate goal is to eradicate ignorance and suffering. But the journey starts from an attempt that a person makes to eradicate, to transcend hatred, which then opens the path to transcend the cause of that hatred, which is ignorance, and which is the ultimate cause of all avoidable suffering in our life and in the lives of others.
Hello, this is Daniel Johnson, MD, and welcome back to Anecdotal Evidence. This is the second of two special episodes that are lectures given by Siddhartha Krishna that were given to our Insight India 2016 group. This lecture was given on March 21st, 2016. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, Siddhartha Krishna is a great scholar and teacher of the philosophy of the Vedas, the Indian tradition, the philosophy of yoga. He has studied Sanskrit and the Vedas for almost his whole life, since he was 4 or 5 years old. He's been immersed in learning this ancient knowledge and wisdom, and he has put to memory thousands of verses of the Vedas and has just dedicated his whole life. His family tradition is rooted in yoga. His father is Sri Prabhuji, who also lives in Rishikesh with Siddhartha, and he is elderly and blind and frail at this point. But in addition to meeting Siddhartha Krishna, we did have the great blessing and opportunity to meet Sri Prabhuji and get to know him as a group and very briefly individually, and it was one of those experiences which defies words. But back to Siddhartha Krishna, as he mentioned in the previous lecture, he spends a lot of his time around taking care of his elderly father. That's how his routine is structured. And in this lecture today, he shares with us an introduction to the Isha Upanishad, or the Ishavasya Upanishad. And this is an ancient text that is only 18 verses long, but he has dedicated a recent teaching series of 58 lectures that were dedicated to exploring the depth of this Upanishad, this ancient text. So clearly it's very rich in meaning, to say the least. And to summarize the whole thing in 1 hour-and-a-half lecture, of course, is a very tall order. So he does get into some of the aspects of the verses of the Ishavasya Upanishad, but he also expounds upon the nature of learning an ancient text. And he elaborates on several concepts which are particularly interesting. At the beginning of the lecture, there's a Q&A with our group. And what is interesting is we had a couple days to think of questions for him. And the 3 questions that we led with were related to how technology is, how it may be impacting the science of yoga and the practice of yoga and what it means for the future. All 3 of our questions were very much related like that. And I got to ask the last question, actually. And I hope you find his answer interesting. I certainly did. I'm going to let him speak for himself on that, but I felt like that was a great way for us to engage in the content of this lecture. And at the end, he shares some of his observations about how there are many different paths to wisdom from different traditions. And I think that is so part of what makes this trip to India so relevant to us here in America, and why I wanted to share this with you through the podcast is because, yes, the Indian tradition is very different, but just as other spiritual traditions have their paths to wisdom and understanding of what health means and what our sense of purpose means, the Indian tradition, with its very rich and ancient heritage, offers any and all of us a great deal of understanding if we choose to investigate it. And so this lecture is, I hope it's very useful for you. I certainly found it interesting and engaging and inspiring to me. And I've been looking forward to sharing it with you. And so without further ado, this is Siddhartha Krishna lecturing to us on March 21st, 2016 at 2:00 p.m. at the Om Karananda Ashram on the banks of the Ganges in Rishikesh, India. Enjoy.
सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। Any questions from the previous class?
I'm wondering about something.
Yeah.
Maybe you can give like a philosophical perspective on it. We went to this beautiful place yesterday, the cave, Vashishtha's cave, and it was so peaceful, incredibly peaceful. And I thought this is maybe what Rishikesh was like before technology, before the Beatles, before craziness.
Before the Beatles.
Yeah, So I wonder, from a philosophical perspective, what you think the role of technology is playing in the shaping of yoga, and kind of as the keeper of the tradition, maybe somebody in your position, is it having some influence? Two things that I noticed as I was walking down, is it cots?
Cots?
Two guys in the orange robes, and they, I might expect that they would be meditating or doing a ritual. They were just looking at their phones and laughing at YouTube videos or showing back and forth, which is great, bonding, but unexpected sight. And then one guy just meditating, and I remember his color of robes, but he was just like river, meditating, doing whatever. And the next time I glanced over, just chatting it up.
Just
chatting up
on the phone.
Yeah.
So
The same one who was meditating.
Yeah.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So it just made me wonder if,
Yeah.
from your perspective, things are getting faster.
Yeah.
And is that changing the culture? Because this is a culture that's been 5,000 years preserved.
Yeah.
But now is technology going to just, in a blip,
Yeah.
make a smashing impact?
Yeah. The answer to this question on one side is very obvious, that it has led to a lot of confusion, a lot of noise, and the very purpose for which people used to come to Rishikesh, that has been undermined. I know some of the serious yoga practitioners over the years, they just, they said, now it's more peaceful in Adelaide, in Australia. Why should we come all the way here, The masters, the kind of masters that I met in my childhood, who used to serve, who used to share their wisdom, who used to share everything that they had without keeping anything for themselves. These kind of masters, most of them, there is one or two are still there, now very old, in their late 90s. They have survived till now. But most of the other saintly people, actually, they have gone further up into the Himalayas and have really are now trying to escape or avoid the area. Or then they have made their ashrams a little bit further away around. So there is, for example, this ashram of Swami Chandra Swamiji, who has been in silence for 30 years, but his ashram is around 100 kilometers towards the west. Swami Ram Sadhakaram is outside the city. So like this, there are still some very peaceful places around the city. My father, who was living here, he decided to move away. It was a very hard decision for him because he did not want to leave Ganga. But then there was no place next to the Ganga where you could find a peaceful spot. So, but at the same time, I don't see a point in blaming technology for this, because technology is a tool, it is an instrument, My teacher at Kailas Ashram, who left his body in 2007, he, at the age of 75, he started introducing computers. He used them for the sake of publication, and preserving his teachings. And so he really very actively, he made use of technology for a good purpose. So on one side, the masters who have an understanding, they were using technology for a good purpose, for a positive purpose, but then some others have been using it. As I said, it's a tool. It's like a knife you can use to cut vegetables and cook tasty food, or you can cut somebody's anything. Non-violence. So they are just tools. So that is now part of the reality. We have to accept it as it is, and the only thing that we can do as people like myself who live in this city, that try to use it for the best, and with understanding try to avoid what is harmful. And we don't have strict rules and regulations, but for example, if you go into a temple, then people really want you to switch off your mobiles, at least in most good temples, or during evening prayers. Now, these new rules have come up that they really, the moment they see somebody speaking on mobile, or mobile is ringing or something, they just say it has to be kept completely in silence. So such things are there. But it's an ongoing challenge. It's an ongoing challenge. On one side it has been destructive, on the other side it has been also very helpful. Yeah. Yes.
Somewhat related, but as Westerners have come in and the popularity of yoga has grown with Westerners, has that caused to distance the local population from their access or their interest in it? Has it become more Western appeal?
On the contrary, now I think that within the last few years, the local public, the interest of the local public is actually increasing. For example, now on every Sunday we have here, this is very new, we have free classes for students from class 5 to class 12. And so many people send their children enthusiastically because they want them to know something about yoga. They want them to. So while on one side it was more, earlier it was something like those who had left their homes and they were coming here, to Rishikesh, the holy city, and spending months or years away from their homes to learn to practice yoga and its philosophy and all this. Now, also those people who don't have that inclination but just simply want to study, also their interest is increasing. So that interest is quite visible now, more and more, and it is increasing day by day. So at least within the last, I must say, 2-3 years, 5 years, particularly now with the government is trying to promote it very much, the Indian government, which is something new. Again, just within the last 1 or 2 years, they have really been trying to promote it. So with that, also the interest has been increasing. Of course, for example, before Baba Ramdev, he was the one who really created an interest amongst the Indian middle class public. Before that, mostly famous teachers like B.K. Iyengar, they were relatively unknown in India and known throughout the world, but nobody knew them in India. So, but with Baba Ramdev, also, and so the interest has been gradually increasing. Yeah.
I had a question that was similar to both of these that I've been thinking about. With technology advancing as it is and humanity destroying the earth, overpopulating, and the talk of artificial intelligence developing and computers, how do you see the future going? Is consciousness, is there a possibility it's going to, the Silicon Age, does that have anything to do with the Dwapara? The Dwapara?
Dwapara.
Dwapara.
Yeah.
I just was wondering what your thoughts were about that.
Yeah. That is one of the reasons we, in this yoga school here, we try to include, together with a very asana-oriented practice, we try to include the teachings of the masters, because without that it just becomes a physical practice, and it doesn't become a practice that allows us to evolve as a human being and become earth conscious, become conscious of the environment, become conscious of this great mystery within ourselves, which is consciousness. So the word that you used, Dvapara, and in India and in the spiritual circles all around the world now, people say it's Kali Yuga. Dvapara Yuga has ended, and it's Kali Yuga, it's the Dark Ages. But to me, this idea never really has had any appeal, because it seems like, to me, it has always seemed like an excuse, that okay, Ganga is being polluted. Well, what can we do? It is Kali Yuga. It is the Dark Ages. The environment is getting polluted. Well, what can we do? It's Kali Yuga. It's the Dark Ages. Technology is ruining everything. What can we do? It's Kali Yuga. It's Dark Ages. Every time something to be blamed comes up, somebody would say, well, it's Kali Yuga. And with that, you sort of find an excuse, and you try to give an excuse, and with that, you don't actually want to face the problem and do something about it. On the contrary, where this idea of the 4 eons originates in the Vedas, we were talking about yesterday, in our last class, we were talking about the philosophy of the Vedas. So there, where this idea originates, there it is very beautiful, because what they say is that Kalishayano bhavati, as long as a person is sleeping in his bed, he is in a state of Kali Yuga. That is Kali Yuga. Kalishayano bhavati, sanjihanastu Kalishayano bhavati, sanjihanastu dvaparaha. The moment he sits up in his bed, it becomes the era of Dvapara. That is Dvapara. And Uttishthas Treta bhavati. The moment he leaves his bed and stands up, he enters the era of Treta. And Kritam Sata Yuge Charan. The moment he starts walking, which means the moment he starts making an effort, he creates the era of Treta Yuga or Satya Yuga, the noble era. So the point is that whenever this idea that thousands and thousands of years ago there was Satya Yuga, and then came Treta, then during the time of Krishna there was Dvapara, and now it is Kali Yuga, this idea of fixed times, this has never made sense to me. It is rather that as long as we are asleep, unconscious, then we are in Kali Yuga. But then the moment we start becoming conscious, we enter a better era, and the moment we start doing something about it, we start entering the golden age. So the idea is that even now, if we remain asleep, if we don't do anything, and the reasons of not doing anything can be many. I mean, for example, we all know the environmental challenges that we are facing. Yet there are individuals who simply don't want to do anything about it because they make their money, they get paid for not doing anything. They lose their interests. So then there nothing can be done. Then they will always remain in Kali Yuga. But the moment we stand up, we do something, and first of all, like Mahatma Gandhi used to say, like the masters of the Vedas say, that what can I do in my life? How can I change my own life, because first of all, studying these teachings, learning them, but then how to translate them into one's life so that we minimize our effect on the environment. That violence, because when the masters speak of non-violence, then today, yes, non-violence on so many different levels, but also non-violence against environment. So these are the ideas that we creatively, it's a challenge for all of us, but yoga somehow has a very universal appeal. From the very beginning, it tries to break the limitations, and that is why if it cannot provide the complete solution, I'm sure that it has the capacity and capability to be part of the solution by teaching us, by making us aware of what is really important in our life. Or are we just running after things? Are they really important? So these questions, when we practice yoga, when we study the teachings, when we, with the help, because today Induji has asked me to talk a little bit about Ishavasyopanishad. These texts, these teachings, these thousands and thousands of years of old teachings, they are not about something out there. They are not about a God up there. They are not about a heaven up there. They are not about a hell down there. They are not even about morality, because we know what is good, what is correct, what is wrong. We don't even really need lists that this is good and this is bad. But if we have that inner light and we learn to listen to that inner voice, just that inner voice, we don't need to listen to the prophets, to the masters, to the teachers, but just to that inner voice to which great personalities like Socrates, for example, listened to, So if we can just learn to listen to that inner voice, then, so these teachings are about ourselves. They are about me, they are about Induji, they are about each one of us. That is what these teachings are about. They are about that inner core, that source of all beautiful inspirations, and they are about how to create an environment within which is joyful, which is peaceful, and then to make it so stable, so firm, that even to a great extent, the external environment, the external chaos, the external confusion cannot influence us. That is the purpose. So the cave that you visited, it's a beautiful place. It's a very peaceful place, as you very rightly pointed out, that today Rishikesh is no more like that. But even when I came, for example, in 1985, still Rishikesh was to a great extent like that. This noise that we hear on the roads, they started, I remember, approximately 1991. It started to, we could sort of slowly, we could hear the noise in 1991. I still remember this temple next door. There is a temple just next door. They started having a loudspeaker early in the morning, around in 89 or 90. And there was a Swiss man living up here. He used to live with his family, and he was a disciple of one of the very great Kriya Yoga masters, who had passed away, in Yogniketan. So I still remember one day morning, he came down and he was so angry, he went on top of the temple and he pulled away the loudspeaker and smashed it with stones. With a stone, he literally smashed it. And of course, then the priests and everybody else were very angry, so it was a big fight. But it didn't solve the problem, because a few years later, everybody had loudspeakers out there. So the point that, and this is not an escapism, or this is not an excuse, but with changing times, yes, to go into such a cave, meditate there for a while, is extremely important. I have spent months and months in Vasishtha cave. Whenever we used to have holidays at the ashram, often my father and I, we used to go there, and we used to spend days and days together. But one can't live forever there. One has to come back into this reality. So then the question always is that, can we bring back that peace from there within us? And can we retain it here, or just keep on criticizing the noise, feeling upset about it, feeling sad about it? That is the other choice. But that is why when the Upanishadic masters, when they speak about ekanta, when they speak about solitude, then they speak about the first level of solitude is that when you go into a peaceful place like Vasishtha Gufa, and you can become completely peaceful. Because I'm amazed that you found it very peaceful, because lately when I have been there, then sometimes there used to be these huge groups of people, and the whole purpose, because I used to take my friends there, let's go to sit in meditation for a while, so we will go. And then when we used to go there, then there used to be this noise, so then they used to feel disturbed, So a lot of people go there, go into these caves, but they take with them, they carry with them all the noise, the chaos with them into those caves. And then they destroy the peace that is there in the cave. So someone who can be in that cave and can acquire that internal peace, his solitude is the solitude of the first kind. And then the masters speak of the second kind of solitude, which is when a person is in chaos, is in noise, and yet he can, with some effort, with some awareness, he can create that peace, that settled state of mind, that focused state of mind, even amidst chaos. That is the second stage of solitude. And the third stage, the final stage, and the most important one, that the masters desired to develop within themselves, is to be naturally at peace, naturally still, to have that stillness within ourselves naturally, effortlessly, even in a place which is extremely chaotic. So that case just provides us the environment. As I said, also in my last class, if the environment is outside the same, like what we want to achieve within ourselves, then it becomes conducive. But then we have to develop that capacity within ourselves, and that capacity should not remain dependent on the external environment. We should be with that wherever we go, wherever we travel, wherever we are. So that is the idea. That is why the masters used to come. They used to spend years and years in the caves to train themselves, but not to end their lives in these caves, because that would be extremely selfish. The purpose was to develop oneself so that we become capable of serving others. So that is it. Yeah. So Induji has asked me today to talk a little bit about Ishavasyopanishad, which is a collection of extremely ancient teachings, approximately 3,000 years old, and last time I talked about the Vedas. The Upanishads are part of the Vedas. They are not separate. They are part of it. They are a very specific section of the Vedas. Within the Vedas is referred to as the Upanishad. What the word Upanishad means, it means to sit close to oneself. So already the idea of what the content of those teachings would be becomes clear by the name itself. The kinds of teachings that either show us a path to sit closer to oneself, or the experience of the masters that they had when they actually sat close to oneself. So that is usually the subject that we find being discussed in the various Upanishadic teachings. So last time when I was talking about Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, yoga of action, yoga of devotion and love, and yoga of experiential wisdom. So the collection of the Vedas, the collection of the teachings in the Vedas, which focus primarily on that experiential wisdom, how to reach that inner meditative state, and then the experience that the masters had. That is, that these teachings have been collected in the Upanishads. The reason we, for example, Ishavasyopanishad, I have been teaching Ishavasyopanishad. This is one of the smallest Upanishads, just 18 verses, and yet I started teaching it last year in January, and of course we have summer vacations from May to August. So except that, throughout the year, last year and now this year, we have just been gradually, slowly and slowly studying the Ishavasyopanishad, sometimes dedicating 3, 4, 5 classes to one mantra, to one verse. And the purpose here with which we were studying this was that we all, when we practice asana, how these deeper teachings can help us to deepen our practice of asana, our practice of pranayama, how these teachings can facilitate us so that our asana practice or our pranayama practice just doesn't remain something physical, but at the same time it becomes a meditation. It becomes a tool to come closer to ourselves. So we deepen our asana practice with the help of these teachings, And then at the same time, as the masters say, that shape your understanding of these teachings through your own practice. Because sometimes these teachings, and this is a problem that is there with all teachings in words, that they can be interpreted in different ways. So you have these different schools of interpretation. This is a universal problem. It's a problem that exists in all ancient traditions, because throughout the centuries, different masters interpret the teachings differently. And the same thing is there in the case of the Upanishads. There have been various traditions, some emphasize on this aspect of the Upanishads, other emphasize on that aspect over the Upanishads. So what the masters say is that rather than getting into the philosophical confusion, let the light of your own practice, when we practice it, when we try to live it, when we first of all introduce it into our practice and then allow it to live into our life, try to introduce it into every aspect of our life, then it gives us a very different kind of understanding, a very modern understanding. And then let that understanding allow us to shape our understanding of the masters. Only then it becomes meaningful. Because most probably it's not important what it meant to them thousands and thousands of years ago. That's not important. One can keep on arguing endlessly that one would say, no, this is what they meant. No, this is what they meant. How can we know? Now the question is, what does it mean to me? How does it benefit me in my internal journey? And that is why the very definition, because every verse of the Vedas, may it be a verse of the Upanishads or other parts of the Vedas, they are known as mantra. They are known as mantras. All the mantras that are recited, pronounced, or that are used for japa as a preparation for meditation, all of these mantras, they are from the Vedas. It is only the verses of the Vedas which are called mantras. Other verses of other texts, other Sanskrit texts, post-Vedic texts, we don't call them mantras, we call them shlokas, but not mantras. So for example, the verses of the Bhagavad Gita, which is an extremely, in fact today, it is the most widely known text of India, yet its verses are not considered mantras. They are shlokas because it is post-Vedic. Only Vedic verses are called mantras. And what does a mantra mean? First of all, of course, a mantra means a set of words. And there, of course, the language has to be Sanskrit. The sequence has to be as it is. Only then it is a mantra. If even the sequence of the words is changed, then it doesn't remain mantra anymore. It has to be exactly the same sequence. And the reason, the choice of words, the sequences, the pronunciation, all has a deep influence on the meaning of the words. Translations never do justice really to what has been expressed in the mantras, and that has been part of my work over this 1.5 year, to show that when we read a translation just shows us one face of a mantra, but a mantra can have many different faces. It can have many different meanings, and as a person goes deeper, it depends very much on the individual's state of inner development, according to which meaning is applicable. If he's a very active practitioner, then a very active meaning. If he is a practitioner of devotion, of love, then the meaning slightly changes. If he is a very meditative practitioner, then the meaning goes deeper. The deeper a person goes within, the deeper the message that comes out from these mantras becomes deeper. So that is why so much emphasis on Sanskrit language and the order of the words is given. But this is just the first stage of a mantra, the first meaning of the mantra, the verbal pronunciations such as the famous Gayatri mantra, Om Tat Savidurvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yonah Prachodayat. This is one mantra which has to be pronounced each word has to be pronounced in the proper sequence for it to be called a mantra. But then the masters say that one cannot keep on pronouncing it forever without any purpose. The purpose is that we understand its meaning. And then when we understand its meaning, when we meditate on it, it gives rise to a very specific state of mind, which is a state of mind which presumably is very similar to the state of mind in which the master was 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago when he pronounced this mantra. So through this mantra, he gave us, that is one of the meanings, because these the meter of these mantras in Sanskrit is called chandas, and chandas means like a vessel, like a pot, in which they have given to us their own state of mind. So in their state of mind, they pronounced that mantra, which was then great, tremendous effort was done, first of all, to preserve it, because for at least till the 10th century after the Common Era, which means just 1,000 years earlier, these teachings were not allowed to be written down. For example, Mahabharata, which is a relatively modern teaching, Ramayana, these were all written down already in the centuries before Christ. They were already written down. But the Vedic teachings, there was very in Europe earlier. It was in the case with the Celts, with the Druid wisdom. They also had these very strong rules against writing down. So the same thing was up to the 10th century. The Vedas were never really committed to writing, but it was again the change of time. The invasions were starting, cultural destruction was happening. There were no more places. The great universities of Takshashila, which is now in Pakistan, or the great university of Nalanda, were being destroyed. So then I think it was in the 12th century when Vidyaranya Muni, the 12th pontiff of one of the pithas in South India, he reconverted a Muslim king and inspired him to establish a great empire, which was known as the Vijayanagar Empire. It is historically a very well-known empire, and it did great work in the sense that it was like an unsurmountable wall that protected these teachings, particularly in South India. And that is why we find more ancient temples in South India than we have in North India. In North India, most temples were destroyed, and what we see today are mostly reconstructed. Even, for example, the temple of Rishikesh, known as Rishikesh was completely destroyed in the 13th century, but then again it was reconstructed later on. So, and this had nothing to do against any particular religion. Of course, the invasion was clearly, it came with Islam. But even in the Vijayanagar Empire army, which was actually set up to protect in the south this environment in these teachings, they had a huge army of Muslim soldiers. At least 20,000 archers they had who were completely Muslim. They were living down there. They had their mosques. They were part of the society, and they were part of this effort to preserve these teachings from the invasion. So it's not something that I'm just saying, okay, it was Hinduism versus Islam. It's nothing like that. It is more the greed for wealth and for control that was hidden within the garb of Islam, and it was, on the other hand, the desire to preserve these teachings. So then, one great personality, the prime minister of that empire, Sayanacharya, what he did, because he had the power, he had the strength, he sent people all around the country and asked all the teachers to come there, all the masters of the Vedas to come there, and then it was officially for the first time, or properly, it had started earlier also, but it was properly committed to writing. Then commentaries were written. So Sayana's commentary is one of the most extensive commentary, not only written by him, but written by a group of scholars. So like this then, efforts were made to preserve it. So, but that is just one aspect of the mantra. The second meaning, the deeper meaning of the mantra is the state of mind. When a person meditates on it, when a person repeats it, and when a person allows the meaning of that mantra to take over, the state of mind that it gives rise to, that is the real mantra. That is the real inner mantra. Because man actually means manas, to think. It is related to the mind, And then they say the third, the deepest meaning of mantra is the light that reflects in that state of mind, the light of which we become aware, which is there all the time. It's not that it's not there, but just because we are always, our awareness is out there, not with the light itself. Everything that we see in the world out there, we see the trees, we see the mountains, we see the water, we see the stones. We think about these things, but what do we actually see? We just see light. But on one side, this is true, we see light only, but our awareness is not with light. How many of us think about the light? We think about what we see in the light. What the masters try to do is to make us aware of the light in which we see everything. So that is present in everything that we see. We cannot see without that light. But to make us aware of that light which then reflects in that peaceful state of mind, that is the third meaning of mantra. And in that sense, we say that the mantra is eternal. Not the words. How can the words be eternal? The word is a temporary thing. But not even the state of mind is also not eternal. But that which gets reflected in our state of mind, that inner light of consciousness of which we become aware in that state of mind, that is what they understand to be eternal. And because the deepest meaning of the word mantra is that that very essence of our being. And in that sense, I said that each and every mantra of the Upanishads is about ourselves, because it talks about something about ourselves. So that is the meaning of Upanishad. Sometimes the word Upanishad is also used in the Upanishads themselves in the meaning of mindfulness, attentiveness, So for example, in one of the statements of the Upanishads, they say that whatever is done with understanding, with love, and with full attention becomes most potent. This is very, very logical. I mean, there is nothing, not a big statement in it. But the question is, do we really do everything in our life with a deeper understanding? Do we put our complete love, our complete heart into what we are doing? And then are we mindful of what we are doing? Are we fully attentive of what we are doing? The practice of bhakti yoga, the practice of meditation, the practice of asana allows us to bring into everything that we do that mindfulness, that love, that compassion, that friendliness. Because it gives us the opportunity to practice it in a safe place, first of all, and when we feel confident, when we feel comfortable with these ideas, then slowly and slowly we can introduce them into our relationships, giving space to others, and like this, practice it. So yadeva vidyaya karoti, whatever a person does with understanding, shraddhaya, with complete dedication and love, and then upanishada, with Upanishad, which means with mindfulness, with being mindful, with attention, fully attentive. Tadeva viryavattaram bhavati. That becomes extremely powerful. Viryavattaram, the word virya. And this city of Rishikesh in ancient times was divided into two quarters. Like Jerusalem has 4 quarters, the Jewish quarter, the Muslim quarter, and the Christian quarter, and then I think the Armenian Christian quarter. So there are these 4. The ancient city of Jerusalem is divided into 4 quarters. So similarly, the city of Rishikesh was divided into these 2 quarters of Shaivas and Vaishnavas. Both were there. So what we see as the city of Rishikesh, that was the Vaishnava quarter, and the area which you have visited, Swami Ram Sadhagram, that area which is now out of Rishikesh, that was the Shaiva quarter. So there is an extremely ancient Shiva temple there known as Virabhadra. And here in the city, there is an extremely ancient Vishnu temple known as Rishikesha, which gives the name. So that area is known as Virabhadra, and this area is known as Rishikesh. Rishikesh became a big city. Virabhadra is still relatively till now as a small suburb of Rishikesh, but again it is becoming bigger and bigger now and more crowded. After a few years it will be a big city also. So, but Rishikesha, and the idea, you see, there are 2 different forms. On one side you have Shiva, on one side you have Vishnu. But one of the Upanishadic teachings is that when we meditate on the divine, because in the understanding of the Upanishads, the divine is completely free from any good or bad properties. It is free from all good and bad properties. Yet for the sake of meditation, for the sake of training our attention, we, the meditator, imposes some noble qualities on that, so that he can meditate on that noble quality, so that by meditating on that noble quality becomes strengthened within the meditator itself. So they were worshipping the form of Vishnu, which is Rishikesh. And Rishikesh means the Lord of the senses. Rishika means senses, and Isha means Lord. So, and that is the whole meaning of pratyahara. After a person deepens one's practice of pranayama and starts to train one's senses, gains mastery over one's senses. And what does mastery over one's senses mean? Control over one's senses, or controlling, because senses are indriyani hayanahu. The Upanishads often compare the senses to the horses of a chariot. If this body is a chariot, then the senses are the horses, because they are the ones who pull us into certain directions. So this is the chariot, I am the charioteer, and the senses are the horses. So to control the senses doesn't mean to not let them experience the external world. It doesn't mean them. It doesn't mean that. What it meant to the masters, to free one's experience of external objects, to free this from this constant tendency either to possess something if we like it, or to destroy it if we don't like it. The moment we like something, we want to have it. We want to grasp it. We see a beautiful flower, we pluck it. We want to have it for ourselves. We are not ready to enjoy it as it is there, beautifully, fully alive, fresh, there. But we cut it. We want to have it for ourselves. We want to own it. We see a beautiful, colorful fish out there. We don't want to allow it to roam freely in the water. We want to capture it either for our taste buds or for our aquarium, because we want to own it, we want to have it. Because the moment we like something, we want to have it. To some extent, it is required. It is required. That is why we have developed this natural tendency. Because if we like some grapes, we want to own it and we want to have them, because we need to nourish ourselves. So it is important. It is part of nourishing ourselves. But then this starts knowing no limits. Our greed becomes so big that everything that is beautiful, everything that is charming, everything that is attractive, we want to own it. And that which is harmful, the moment, for example, even here, up where in the village I live, sometimes snakes come into the village. And there are actually villages in India where people, since centuries, they have never killed a snake. And snakes freely roam around and they don't bite the people. But the people here don't understand this. So the moment they see a snake, whether it is poisonous or not, no, but they just kill it. Only so idiotic, so stupid. Because sometimes these snakes, they are so beautiful. I see them sometimes in the forest, but the moment they enter, why? Because, this is dangerous, this is harmful. We don't want it in our locality. So let us destroy this. So the moment we see something good, we want to possess it. The moment we see something bad, something that doesn't suit us, because that is our description. We always keep ourselves in the center, and whatever suits us, we want to own it. We don't want that to be free. We want to own it. We want to possess it. And that which doesn't suit me, that is, I want to destroy it. I want to annihilate it. I want to get rid of it. So this continuous judgmental approach that we have in our life, the moment our senses contact something, we label things either, wow, this is good. Oh, I need this, I have to have this, or this is very harmful, this is very bad for me, we should get rid of this. So this constant labeling as good and bad, which happens in our life, to free oneself from that. Just let things be the way they are. Let them be. Just let the flower be, let the snake be. Just as it is. Why should we destroy it, or why should we pluck it? Just let it be as it is. So this tendency is to cultivate this tendency is what is understood by acquiring control over one's senses. That is what allows us to cultivate peace within ourselves, satisfaction within ourselves. So the idea of Rishikesha, why did they come here and they were worshipping Rishikesha? Not because they wanted to please a god somewhere up there who he's ever pleased, and he's pleased ever, he or she is pleased ever the way we are, because we are his or her creation. But we meditate on that form, on that particular form, on that particular name, so that that capability, that power also develops within ourselves. By meditating on Rishikesha, we also, at least even if we can become a little bit of Rishikesha, like that entity, then, so it becomes like an ideal for us, against which we have an ideal which then inspires us to become like it. Similarly, then you have the other quarter. The names were different, the forms were different, but Virabhadra, the beautiful hero, that is, Vira means hero, and Bhadra means beautiful, joyful, that which gives happiness, joy. So, and the idea of Vira in Sanskrit, because again the English word hero has a very has that context of a battlefield, but in Sanskrit this is just one kind of Vira, Parakrama Vira, somebody who is very powerful in the battle. But then we have 4 different kinds of heroes. So that is the first one, the hero of the battles. Then a hero of compassion, Daya Vira. Then a hero of knowledge, Vidya Vira. Then a hero in charity, Dana Vira, like Dana Vira Karna, that character, Dana Vira, a hero in charity. And then ultimately Mahavira, like Vardhamana Mahavira, the great hero who was the greatest hero in India, who is known today, whose surname is the greatest hero. He was one of the most enlightened, one of the most non-violent beings non-violent humans that ever lived on the Indian subcontinent, approximately at the same time of the Buddha. He was a little bit elder to Buddha, just a few years elder to Buddha. They were living in proximity in the same area. The Buddha was there and Vardhamana Mahavira was there. Buddha's message went into the whole world. Vardhamana Mahavira's message was slightly different. He never wore clothes. He was always naked, without clothes. He was roaming around without clothes. But he inspired, like Buddha inspired, a very distinct tradition which is known today as Buddhism. His teachings inspired what is known today as Jainism. Jainism, which is an extremely ancient, because he was just the 24th master, the last master of an extremely ancient tradition. So Jainism is extremely ancient, but he is the last master of that tradition, who is referred to as Mahavira, as the greatest hero, the greatest non-violent person. And even today, his followers, they cover their mouth because they believe that when we speak, some violence happens against tiny microbes. They get destroyed by these vibrations. So they try to live their life in such a way that they can practice non-violence in every aspect in their being to the greatest possible degree to which a living person can achieve. So that is the idea of Veera, even though it is translated, for example, Veerabhadrasana. Veerabhadrasana in yoga. Now, the big American yoga journals, warrior pose. And then it feels like, somebody, the warriors. But the idea of Veerabhadra, the beautiful warrior, in the context of yoga is radically different. That kind of warrior is a very first stage, of course. He's also respected because he gives up his own life for the security of the society. So he also is deeply, deeply respected. I'm not saying anything against that. But that is just the first ideal. Beyond there are various levels of ideals when we speak of a warrior, because this war then, it's not a war against any external enemy. The Upanishadic masters make it clear again and again that the external enemies are just a creation of our internal enemies. So the war has to be against our own, what are known as the Shadripus, as the 6 internal enemies: selfish lust, anger, greed, confusion, envy, and pride. The first one, actually, that selfish desire, again, to own everything, which then also gives rise to hatred, because somebody else also wants to own it. So then 2 people come, they want to own the same flower, then they have to fight for each other. Then hatred arises. One of them kills each other. Then the children keep on fighting with each other. That it just continues, like the Buddha said that hatred can never pacify hatred. It is only love. Nahi berena berani sammanti kudachanam. That hatred can never, various manifestations of hatred can never pacify various manifestations of hatred. Aberena cha sammanti. Only transcending hatred, forgiveness, love can pacify hatred. Esa dhammo sanantano. This is an eternal truth. So, for that, a person has to fight against these internal enemies. These internal enemies are not only somewhere out there, they are within each one of us. It is easy to see the enemies out there, but to find the enemies within and to fight them, to get rid of them, to transcend them. The masters often use the word Vita, from whom they have gone away, because they did not get anything to eat. We feed them. We feed them by identifying with them. We strengthen them. But when we stop identifying with them, when we stop feeding them, then they themselves, like we have these so many wild animals up there. the more we feed them, the more they come. And then when we go away for 1 month or 2 months, 3 months in the high Himalayas, and when we come back, then none of them is around because nobody has fed them. Then gradually they realize that we are back within 1 or 2 months again. They come because we feed them. So as long as we feed them, these enemies will be around us. But when we stop feeding them, then they will go away themselves. So it's not even destroying them, it's not even really a war against them, but it is rather just stopping to feed them anymore, to learn how to do that. So that idea of Virabhadra, that noble warrior, how does a person acquire that strength? That strength is within, but it becomes distracted. It becomes scattered in all directions. So a person becomes a Virabhadra by focusing it. That's all. So whether it was the Shaivas worshipping and meditating on Virabhadra, or whether it was the Vaishnava traditions worshipping and meditating on Rishikesh, both of them were doing the same thing. And so that, and then when Patanjali speaks about that inner strength which is required to cultivate mindfulness, Shraddha, Virya, that inner strength, and then Smriti, which means mindfulness. So that kind of inner strength, that is what the Upanishadic masters, when in the context of Upanishad, when they use the word Upanishad, Vidya, understanding, dedication, and mindfulness. Whatever we do becomes more potent, it becomes more powerful. So like this, the Upanishadic teachings, particularly the Ishavasya Upanishad, it touches on various subjects. It speaks about Karma Yoga, it speaks about Jnana Yoga, it speaks about the result of being negligent of this inner core of our being, the result of turning away from it. The result of turning away from it. When we turn away from the source of light, the sun is always shining. The sun never sets. What happens is that the earth on which we live, because it is rotating itself, the area in which we are turns itself away from it. The sun is always there. If the sun would set, then what would support our earth? Our earth would just go into empty space and would be destroyed. But it is the sun which lies at the center, which keeps the entire solar system going. So even though in the night we don't see the sun, but it is still there. And that is why in the Vedic teachings we have these two different words, Mitra and Varuna. Both refer to the sun, but Mitra is the visible sun and Varuna is the invisible sun. Mitra is the visible sun that we see in the day, which is there and we can see it. And Varuna is the invisible sun, which has the same influence on our being, on our life and everything, yet we can't see it. People back then would have said, but then where is the sun? Well, they would say, now it has gone into the stage of Varuna, that it is there, but you just can't see it. So what happens that when we turn around, we happen to enter a world of darkness. The same thing happens in the understanding of the master of Ishavasya Upanishad when he says that those who turn away from those whose awareness turns away from awareness itself, which means from the light of awareness, from the inner core of their being, which is consciousness, those who turn away from that and just remain lost in the external world, always the word that he uses is asura, somebody just working constantly to gratify one's senses, just to fulfill the needs of one's senses. That's all. Someone who is just always engaged in that and therefore remains completely forgetful of that inner essence. He reaches the same state like we do at night. The sun is shining, the sun of consciousness is ever present, but our awareness turns away. Then, knowingly or unknowingly, we have placed our palms over our own eyes, and then we say it is dark, because we have turned away from it. So that is why he says that those who remain negligent of themselves, they enter the realms that are filled with darkness, where this light of consciousness, even though it is present, because how would a person even become aware of darkness? It is, we know our ignorance in the light of our consciousness. That is why, at least, because one of the important steps a person can take, the most important step actually a person can take towards wisdom, is to become aware of one's ignorance. That is what, philosophy in the West has its very foundation. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that philosophy in the West has its foundation in Socrates. In Socrates, nobody more beautifully expressed this idea of becoming aware of one's ignorance than Socrates or Plato, because we know Socrates through Plato in his writings. Do the same thing we find in the teachings of the Advaita Vedantic masters when they say Niyadigyaha. It is easy to find knowers of the future who can tell you about the future, that this will be the future, this will happen. It is easy to find such people. It is easy to find those who can tell us what is right and what is wrong. Niti jyah api sulabha. Niti, this is right and this is wrong. It is so easy. There are so many people around there who can tell us what is right and what is wrong. Actually, everybody. When it comes to practicing themselves, the story is different. But everybody knows and everybody can tell us what is right and what is wrong. It is even easy to find Shastrajna, knowers of the scriptures who can tell this Upanishad tells this Upanishad tells this is the quintessence of this Upanishad, the teaching of this Upanishad, the Vedas is this. You can find so many of them out there. You can even find enlightened ones, those who claim that we have known Brahman, that pure inner consciousness, who are enlightened, who declare themselves to be enlightened. It is easy to find them. And today, it has become very common. And actually, in cities like Haridwar and Rishikesh, and I'm not saying this as a joke now, I've been joking till now, but now I'm saying it very seriously. You just can't know if the next person, he could be clad in dirty clothes, and you would be thinking, what is this person doing? But he could be, he can be fully enlightened. He can be fully enlightened. Yes, I've really experienced this myself. Can't just hear sometimes so different kind of people come, but some of them, they have been able to cultivate that deep state of constant awareness. So even that can be found. Enlightened ones can be found, particularly in cities like Rishikesh and Haridwar. There are so many enlightened ones. But then Appaya Dikshita, this great master of Advaita Vedanta, he says, what is the most difficult to find is someone who has known his own ignorance, someone who knows their own ignorance, someone who has become aware of their ignorance. And that is the most important step. Yet, how do we become aware of that ignorance? Also, how, when I say, I don't know this, what is the entity which knows that it doesn't know it? So it knows something, but it doesn't know a lot, and therefore it is capable of declaring that I don't know. Ultimately, it is drawing back to that. So like this, the Upanishadic teachings, then of course Ishavasya Upanishad dedicates a few mantras on universal oneness, on creating an awareness of this deep interconnectedness, this essence of our being, on the level of which we are one and deeply interconnected, each one of us. So it dedicates a few mantras to that, and the final culmination, the very core message of Ishavasya Upanishad, then as a result of that, when a person even just has faith in this teaching, what about to experience it? But just even having faith in it, because faith and experience, they are two different things. Of course, the goal of the masters is always to lead us into the experience. But even from the very beginning, after we hear it and we have faith in it, already when we have just faith in it, such teachings allow us or enable us to transcend Vijugupsa, what this Maharshi of this Ishavasya Upanishad calls hatred towards others. So for him, the idea of transcending hatred, the idea of going beyond hatred, becomes one of the most important ideas. Of course, then he says later in the next verse that even hatred has its origin in ignorance. So the ultimate goal is to eradicate ignorance and suffering. But the journey starts from an attempt that a person makes to eradicate, to transcend hatred, which then opens the path to transcend the cause of that hatred, which is ignorance, and which is the ultimate cause of all avoidable suffering in our life and in the lives of others. So this is how the journey of these teachings of 18 verses unfolds. Somehow I have seen this repeatedly in the teachings. The teacher of this Ishavasya Upanishad is someone called Dadhyang. His name is Dadhyang Dadhichi. The other name is rather well known. And he also had a sister, Dadhimati. He had a sister, Dadhimati, and he himself was Dadhyang or Dadhichi, as in other stories he is known. These two personalities are very beautiful personalities. The siblings, one brother and one sister. In Rajasthan there is a temple, extremely ancient Divine Mother temple, dedicated to his sister, who is known as the sister of Dadhyang Atharvana. And the most beautiful thing about him is that, like Kant, there were first of all these rationalists and then the empiricists, and they were constantly fighting against each other, And then Kant saw that each one of them has some truth in them. So he brought together, he took out the real ideas, the most meaningful ideas of the rationalists and the most meaningful ideas of the empiricists, and then presented it through his own philosophical understanding, which makes him really one of the greatest philosophers. And the same thing I find in Dadhyanga Atharvana, that he must have been living in a time when there were various masters who were presenting a thesis, and then there were masters who were presenting an antithesis. And what he does, that he presents a synthesis. So he has a deeply synthetical approach. And this is again something beautiful about the Upanishadic masters, about the Vedic masters, that they are the most influential masters are the ones that have had a tremendous synthetical approach, if I can use that approach of synthesis, where really they were at the end of a long tradition and they were trying to incorporate the best, even out of mutually opposing views, contradictory views. They were trying to extract the essence, the best, and present that. So that is why the Upanishads, particularly the Upanishads and the Vedas, and whatever was directly related to that, for example, Bhagavad Gita, because what Bhagavad Gita doesn't present anything new, not even one single verse of the Bhagavad Gita presents anything new. It just takes out the essence of the Upanishads and presents it in a nutshell. The prayer of the Bhagavad Gita makes it very clear. Sarvo Upanishado Gavaha. All these Upanishads are like the cows. You see, there is no picture of Krishna here, but if you have seen the pictures of Krishna, Krishna is a cowherd. He has always cows around him. These cows were the cows of the Upanishads. They were not external cows, but these cows symbolize Upanishads. And the reason of this, because the Sanskrit word for cow, which is very similar, because it's an Indo-European language, it is gau, cow, and gau, go. Go in Sanskrit means a cow, and go in Sanskrit also means a ray of light ray. The word go also means a ray of light. So what is presented in the Upanishads are rays of that inner sun of wisdom. And therefore, the word go, not the word cow, but at least the Sanskrit word go is applicable to both. Or in a deeper sense, it refers to the rays of wisdom. And when the masters created mythological stories out of these deeper teachings, for them to become easily understandable to the common people, they created mythology out of it. They used the same words but changed the meaning. So the same word go is here in the Vedas for the rays of light, and the same word go is used in for example, Bhagavatam, where it is used for the cows that are... But anybody who has studied Bhagavatam well will actually tell you that the cows that are there around Krishna are nothing but the mantras of the Vedas, the richas of the Vedas. And as a cowherd, he took the essence, the milk. And this is again an important idea, because cows can be of various colors. Gavamaneka varnata. The Upanishads, they say that cows can be of various colors, but the milk will always be of one color. The essence will always be the same. So yes, some of the masters have said this, some of the masters have said that. In their teachings, they are very different from each other, sometimes even mutually contradicting, because the experience of one master is this, the experience of this master, they are speaking from their own experience. Why should the truth be only shaped in one frame. Why? That is his experience and that is her experience. And yet, when we look at the essence of every master's experience, it is the same. And this is again something that can be beautifully applied, whether we study Sufi Islam, we study the Quran, we study the Bible, we study the Old Testament, the New Testament, the teachings of all the great masters. The language that they use is different. The religious context in which they have spoken is different. The time that they addressed was different. The people that they addressed were different. Yet, why should we look at those differences and become confused when the essence is always the same? The milk is always the same. And what Krishna does in the Bhagavad Gita, he brings out the milk. He takes out the essence. And that is why he is a cowherd. That is why he takes care of the cows in that sense. So that is the deeper essence of the mythological story around Krishna. So like this, when it comes to the Vedas and the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, these teachings have been universal also in the Indian context, in the sense that India has been extremely varied. There have been so many different traditions, and actually you can have every belief. You will find beliefs of Christianity, all kinds of what you would think that they are purely Christian beliefs, you would find them in some of the Indian traditions. What you would think, we generally think that Hindus worship many gods, or they worship statues. But there are traditions which are as opposed to statue worship in Hinduism like Islam is. So all the faiths are there, and yet all of them study the Bhagavad Gita, all of them study the Upanishads, all of them respect them, because what the Upanishads do, the Upanishads, rather than allowing themselves to go into any sectarian direction or allowing themselves to go into anything that could be limited. A person can have a limited interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, but a person cannot change Bhagavad Gita into becoming something limiting. That is completely limitless, beyond any limitation. So in that sense, these teachings are beautifully universal. I think the time is over for this time, and soon a new class will start at 4 o'clock.
Oh, that's why.
So that is why already somebody just when they realize that some class is going. So that's basically I will just conclude by mentioning 3 teachings which have inspired me. Every teaching of the Vedas, every mantra of the Vedas has a depth. But when I take out my essence, I take it out according to my understanding, according to what it is not maybe it's not as meaningful to everybody else, but for me it has been extremely meaningful in my life, and therefore I believe that it would be meaningful for everyone else also. So I would like to share it with each one of you. The 3 mantras. The first one is Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahudha Vadanti, which means yes, the essence, the truth is one. That everybody agrees. We cannot have 2 truths. The truth will always be one. It cannot be 2. But something that we often fail to recognize is that Vipraha Bahudha Vadanti, wise men or women express it in various ways. So yes, we have to insist on the oneness of the truth, but at the same time also respect the modes of expression. the language, the context in which they have expressed the truth. So that allows us to see the unity in diversity. That is the first thing. Then the second thing is this message which inspires us to become open, to open up to new thoughts. Ano bhadraha kradavo yantu vishvataha. Let beautiful thoughts, beneficial thoughts come to us from the whole world. Adabdhasaha, which not the kinds of thoughts that would lead to pride, but thoughts, not the kinds of thoughts which strengthen our pride, but which make us humble. Aparitasaha, may they come to us unhindered, without any hindrance. And the hindrance is not out there. When we close ourselves to new ideas, then we create a hindrance, that's all. So when we generate that receptivity in ourselves, so that aparidasa udbhidaha, thoughts which have the potential to uproot the weeds that have accumulated within this inner garden. So the thoughts which have the capacity to uproot, let such beautiful thoughts come to us from the entire world. So this openness. And then the third mantra, which is part of a hymn dedicated to the Mother Earth, where she is addressed as the home of people who speak various tongues and follow different customs. Customs which are distinct from each other. Janam, O Mother Earth, Janam Bibhrati, you bear. Bibhrati means you bear people. Vivachasam, who speak various types of languages. Nana Dharmanam, and follow their own various types of customs according to the areas in which they live. That is, anthropology today helps us to understand how these customs have evolved, and they were meaningful in their own areas. So you are like a home to these people of various customs and of various languages. So this welcoming acceptance of people of diverse religious and linguistic backgrounds, these three things, that this is what I see as the most inspiring message that the Vedas can give us, with which we can constantly evolve ourselves into this direction with the help of whatever we practice, asana, pranayama, meditation. These are practical means that give us that strength. So this, I will leave it here and respect the limit of time.
What if we don't want to leave you?
It has been such a pleasure. Thank you very much, Induji. Thank you very much. Also thanks to Agotaji. She's not present today, I think, but please convey my thanks to her because you were the ones who did the effort, who made the effort to bring all of us together under one roof. And so, yojagas tatra durlabha, the one to bring together people, that is the most rare today, who brings together. We live our own lives, but then we have these individuals who bring us together, who have to make an effort. So then they bring us together. So they are the ones that we need to be most thankful to. So I'm extremely thankful and for each one of you for being here. I hope you have a pleasant visit to India. And against, a lot has changed and a lot is constantly changing. But if you look at the essence, at the deep love that is there in still a big number of people, then this country really becomes an enchanting country. And I'm not saying that love doesn't exist elsewhere. I think it is a very human tendency to love, but somehow because of these ideas which are always in the environment, they come up in politics, they come up everywhere. So even if somebody gets radicalized a little bit, there are people who will then bring these ideas, and radicalization doesn't become powerful enough to have an influence that at least we can feel. So that is why I believe that as the place of origin of yoga, India has still can teach a lot through this ancient wisdom, beautiful wisdom. Asana practice is just one aspect of it. It makes our body beautiful, but the deeper aspects of yoga make our mind beautiful. They make our heart beautiful. So, thank you very much. Namaste. Conclude with this prayer for universal well-being. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.